Thank you for having me, Slow Factory, for honoring this dialogue and this conversation. Very special thank you to the accessibility you all have created here with the interpreters and for the interpreters that are here. I appreciate you. Um, I am Tazin Khan, and I am the CEO and founder of Cyber Collective. Uh, if you wanted to go to the next slide, Nicole, that would be great. A little bit of background on me. I am a cybersecurity specialist that has been in industry for about 10 years now. My expertise is in compliance, product consulting, and architecture mapping. And through my career and in my work in cybersecurity, I ended up experiencing some things and seeing a lot of gaps. And those gaps led me to ask questions. Those questions led me to look for answers. And the answer ended up being Cyber Collective. I wanted to create a safe space where people could not only learn about technical and complex topics, but feel safe doing it and feel like they have a place to learn hard things, even if they don't come from a technical background. So at Cyber Collective, we empower people to think critically about their relationship with technology and inspire a more socially responsible future. We believe that if we can help communities develop agency and autonomy as it relates to technology, we'll lower the spread of misinformation and disinformation and help dismantle some of the systemic failures of our digital media systems. That's why I'm so excited to be here today and speak to all of you about algorithmic bias and help you understand how it may impact your work, but definitely how it can impact your livelihood. We've designed our work at Cyber Collective so that it empowers critical thinking to drive change in your daily habits, personal behavior, and hopefully consequentially in technology. And I'm so thankful to be in a space with a diverse group of people. And hopefully you'll feel comfortable to share your perspectives, regardless of your technical and academic background, because this is a space that is here to honor your identity and lived experience. I also want to share that I'm not an expert in algorithmic bias. I am an aficionado, and I have a page of acknowledgements to all of the women of color specifically that have brought me to this space today. And so much of this is based in their research, and I'll be sharing their names throughout the presentation. Next slide, please. So today, technology is more than scrolling through memes. It is a lot more than catching a convenient ride, and all of the other conveniences that technology brings. Technology is truly an extension of who we are and how we show up in the world. And many in this room, perhaps, have experienced firsthand the negative effects of technology, from inequities in social media to healthcare, even through personal finance. Our information gets used, shared, sold, which consequently reinforces societal and economic inequities. Additionally, and something that is wildly overlooked, is the inherent bias and social injustices embedded into the very technologies that we all love and adore. Technologies that we also have quite tumultuous relationships with, i.e. Instagram. I can only speak for myself. But as Dr. Sophia Noble says, discrimination is embedded into code and increasingly in artificial intelligence technologies that we are reliant on by choice or not. Next slide, please. So for today's presentation, I am going to cover what algorithms are and do my best to explain it as simply as possible. I will discuss some of the bias that exists in algorithms at large, and then specifically within social media. And then my hope is to open up the floor to do some narrative sharing. And during that time, I would ask that you raise your hand and know that if you do decide to leave your camera on, you'll be recorded because the session is being recorded, but feel free to leave your camera off and share your voice. That the narrative sharing piece is so important to the work that we do at Cyber Collective, to be able to take your sentiment and share it with the industry and make sure that they understand how everyday people feel when they learn new technical topics for the first time, or perhaps in more depth after reading headlines or stories about it. So the narrative sharing is one of my favorite parts. And so if you could be interactive, if you have the capacity or the space to, it would mean the world. And then lastly, I do my best to leave people with tangible and actionable things that they can leave the presentation with, because I will be sharing things that will have your mind boggling. And I want to make sure that you feel that you are in control of your relationship with technology. The last thing I'll say is sometimes presentations like this end up leaving you with more questions than answers, and that probably might be the case today. And the goal of critical thinking, at least in our organization, is allowing you to come up with the questions that you want to ask. That's the whole point of this. And so if we don't get down to all of the answers, that's okay. That's the point. The point is to get everybody in this room thinking critically, asking questions, and doing self-reflection about their relationship with technology. Okay, all right. What the F? Am I allowed to curse? I don't. What are algorithms? Does anybody know what algorithms are? If you could pop that in the chat, and the ideas that you have of what algorithms may be. I would love to hear your perspective. And then also if you can answer in the chat, perhaps, is this a topic that you've been researching or thinking about in the past 6 months to a year? So algorithms are essentially a set of instructions that solve a problem or accomplish a specific task, right? A lot of people assume that algorithms are only found in technology or only found in the essence of computers, but algorithms are actually all around us. An algorithm can be a recipe for curry. That's an algorithm. Although in my family, there are no recipes. You just add spices until things taste right. But at any rate, it's still an algorithm, right? But in this case, specifically, and today, we'll be talking about algorithms in a way that as a series of instructions to solve a specific computing problem. And that is the foundation that this presentation is set in. Next slide, please. So this is a visual of what an algorithm is, right? So it's information that you input into a machine, right? The set of rules to obtain the expected outcome from any given input. And then you have the output. The algorithm is in the middle, right? And so the algorithm is the rules, the instructions, the methodology that becomes automated, right? And within computers. I'm going to stop there and just make sure that everybody in this room understands what an algorithm is. And I'll go into more of it, but just right now, does everybody feel comfortable with a really generic high level definition of what an algorithm is? If you could just put a yes, there are like almost 119 people in this room. Awesome. So it's a set of rules. It can be a recipe, but it's that middle, it's the how. It's not necessarily the input, it's not the output. It's the best part of the sandwich, right? Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. This is good. All right, I'm doing my job right. People are understanding. Amazing. This is the very dictionary definition of algorithms. Algorithms are a set of instructions designed to perform a specific task. This can be a simple process, such as multiplying two numbers or a complex operation. such as playing a compressed video file. In computer programming, algorithms are often created as functions, and this definition was founded on techterms.com. Next slide, please. So algorithms are the reason why we have some incredible advancements in technology. We have incredible tools, we have access to things. However, in many occasions, things that are good for some are not always good for many. And efforts with good intentions often can still have very, very harmful consequences. This is a quote from Dr. Sophia Noble's book, Algorithms of Oppression, which I have here in my hands. My biggest flex is that she is my mentor and that I know her. But she says something that is so beautiful, and says part of the challenge is understanding algorithmic oppression is to understand the mathematical formulations to drive automated decisions are made by human beings. This is extremely important because a lot of times, because technology is not a human, we think of technology as being, I don't know a different word to use, but as technology, we separate it from ourselves. And so a lot of times it can be assumed that, well, how can a piece of software be racist? How can a piece of code be racist? And the matter of fact is, it's a person building that code. There's a human behind it. So whatever assumptions that individual has, of course, it's going to bleed into what they build. And that's very natural. It's one of the most natural parts of the human experience. Your lived experiences, of course, play into what you create and your day-to-day interactions. And it is the same for algorithms as well. Next slide, please. So we understand the definition of algorithms at a pretty high level. There are a lot more complexities, and you can go very, very deep in understanding what algorithms are, what machine learning is. We won't be covering that today, but there are tons of resources online in simple language that can help you if you're interested. Now, the next part of the talk is going to be around social media and bias algorithms. This is where all the spiciness is. This is where the tea is. And this is where a lot of the conversation gets very, very grave. And I just want to warn anybody that is on this presentation, we will be talking about racial inequities. We'll be talking about the harms against Black people and people of color, not to any full detail, but that will be touched on. And so please know that if you are sensitive to that, be aware that we will be diving in. All right, next slide, please. Bias in social media and algorithms at large. So algorithmic bias, wherever you find it, like I said, is very similar to human bias. And the unfortunate part, though, is that algorithms can spread its bias on an incredible scale, extremely fast. And Dr. Joy Buolamwini coined a term called the coded gaze, which she defines as the embedded views that are propagated by those who have the power to code systems. And intentional or not, algorithms can be biased for a lot of reasons. Racial bias comes from the lack of diversity on teams, from capitalism, from the shitty systemic failures that are already in place, and also from non-diverse training data, as Buolamwini shares in her Medium article, The Coded Gaze. Yes, the screen is stuck, Nicole, by the way. If we could go, there you go. Thank you. She shares more information about the coded gaze in her Medium article called The Coded Gaze, Algorithmic Bias. What is it and why should I care? Next slide, please. These are some examples of bias outcomes, what happens when algorithms are biased. And I've broken them down into different verticals: financial, healthcare, biometric technology, and e-commerce. An example within the financial industry is more gender-based. And there is an example where this technologist was going after wanted to get a credit card. He got it for himself and his wife has the same, I believe, salary. She has the same level of ownership to things, the same credit score, but she was allotted a different credit limit than her husband. And this completely blew up. This was in 2019. And it showed that this Apple credit card had a very, very clear gender bias. Now, the funniest part about this is that Steve Wozniak, who is one of the biggest parts of Apple, tweeted and co-signed that this is something that he and his wife experienced as well. And this opened the floodgates. In some ways, Black women, specifically Dr. Noble, Dr. Joy, Dr. Ruman Chowdhury, so many people have been talking about this bias for a really long time, but this at least got the attention of folks in 2019. So that's one example. Gender bias, automated. The outcome was a woman did not get the same credit capacity as a man, her husband specifically. In the healthcare space, it's been demonstrated that simple prediction rules for heart disease, which were used in routine medical practice in industrialized countries for decades, were biased, specifically biased against Black people. In the biometric world, it is very well known that facial recognition technology cannot recognize people with darker melanated skin. This is a problem that bleeds into so much. Any industry that's looking to use biometric technology for any type of identification, it's something that we are seeing in the police force, in the surveillance community, within the tech border crisis, within social media platforms, proctoring tools, the list goes on. In the e-commerce space, in 2015, Amazon realized that their algorithm used for hiring employees was biased against women. So these are just some high-level examples of the bias that the output of bias in algorithms that we see. And similarly, Google was criticized for racist autocomplete, which is entirely what Dr. Safiya Noble's book is about. And both IBM and Microsoft were embarrassed by their facial recognition algorithms that turned out to be better at recognizing men than women and white people than any other race. Next slide, please. So the way that digital decisions reinforce oppressive social relationships and enact new modes of racial profiling is called technological redlining. And this term was coined by Dr. Safiya Noble. In social media specifically, algorithms are used to display a lot of personalized content. Many of you may or may not know what social media tools are collecting about you while you're using their tool. Drop in the chat if you do know what type of information is potentially being collected. And while you do that, I do want to share an excerpt from Dr. Noble's book. And I highly, highly recommend that folks read this book. And she shares a story here about trying to find activities for her daughter and her daughter's friends for a nice day where she is. And so she opened up her Google to enter in different search terms that would perhaps reflect their interests, the demographic of her daughters and friends, and information needs. But she was looking through and typed in, and what she retrieved was appalling to her. And this wasn't the first time that this has happened, but she was very confused after to find that the search results were just filled with porn for anything related to Black girls. And in that moment, she thought that it was because of her search history and engagement with a lot of Black feminist texts, books, and videos. But it didn't matter. She continued her research, and she shares here in quote from page 18 of her book. As a Black woman growing up in the late 20th century, I also knew that the presentation of Black women and girls that I discovered in my search results was not a new development of the digital age. I could see the connection between search results and tropes of African Americans that are as old and endemic to the United States as the history of the country itself. My background as a student and a scholar of Black studies and Black history, combined with my doctoral studies in the political economy of digital information, aligned with my righteous indignation for Black girls everywhere. I searched on. So she continued her search, and in the book, in the figure, she shares the first page of search results on the keywords of Black girls on September 18th, 2011. And it's all porn, top to bottom. Everything related is porn, and then it goes into Black girl problems, Black girls with long hair. And the searches related to Black girls were Black girls ghetto, Black girls party, Black girls violent femmes, Black girl faces. And then she continued her search. And again, this is graphic, this is quite traumatic. So I really do urge anybody listening to keep your hearts intact and step away as you need. In figure 1.3, she shares the first page of image search results on the keywords Black girls, and the images look like this. They are images of very, very sexualized photos of Black girls. She shares the images of Black girls, and most of them have big breasts, longer hair, pressed hair. And then in figure 1.4, she types in the phrase, "Why are Black people so?" And the search was done on January 25th, 2013. And the automated terms that populate are, why are Black girls, and this is in order, so loud, so athletic, so lazy, so fast, so tall, so mean, so religious, so ghetto, so rude. Google auto suggests search results when searching the phrase, why are Black women so? And this is on the same day, January 15th, 2013, came up, why are Black women so angry, so loud, so mean, so attractive, so lazy, so annoying, so confident, so sassy, so insecure, so bitter. And then on the flip side, if you search, why are white women so? It populates. So pretty, so beautiful, so mean, so easy, so insecure, so skinny, so annoying, so perfect, so fake, so rude. These are examples of the search terms, and they continue in her book. Again, this book is called Algorithms of Oppression by Dr. Sophia Umoja Noble, who I honor so deeply for the work that she has done. And before I continue, I just want to give everybody some space to take this all in. for a second while I start diving into the bias in social media. We know what algorithms are. We know what they entail. They are essentially a set of instructions. We also have learned that a person has to put in a set of instructions for the algorithm. And what Dr. Safiya Noble shares in this book, and what's very apparent, is that there were real humans that had to put in that information to allow for those Google search terms to auto-populate. The auto-populated information is the extension of someone's opinion. It is the extension of somebody else's lived experience and perception of Black girls and women at large. So, like Dr. Noble says, technological redlining, right? It doesn't start and stop at search terms and perception of Black women, and it doesn't just have to do with what we're looking for on the internet and what shows up, but it is a part of every part of their, it is a part of the internet entirely, right? The internet is really inherently racist because the internet was developed by racist people. And that's hard to hear for a lot of folks, but it's the truth, and that's just what it is. And so there's a lot of work being done to uncover it, unravel it, and try to turn it around. And so in social media specifically, algorithms are used to display a lot of personalized content. So I'll look in the chat. I think a lot of you know and understand that the type of information that's being collected, your age, sex, location, correct, friends, ethnicity, what you like, don't like, who you interact with, what you're browsing, shopping, targeting for more ads. Yes, all accurate information. It also collects how long you're hovering over a photo, what you're typing, even if you delete what you've typed and you don't send it to somebody, who you message, the access into your photos, the access to your microphone, the metadata within your photos, where you are going, what is on any other connected application that you're using your social media login for. So if you're using Facebook login to get into another app, know that Facebook has now full rights of anything that you do on that app. So all of this information is being collected. And if you're curious, you can also go through privacy policies to learn more about what's being collected and what these entities can do with your data. But what's happening with this information is it's collecting, and it goes back to that diagram I shared earlier. It's inputting all of that information to automate and give you an output of a very curated, personalized experience. Which I want to share through this is, I'm not going to lie. I really like knowing what things I might like. I don't mind when social media tells me that there's a new millennial dog brand. I'm a new dog mom and I want my dog to look fly. And thankfully, because of the things I've been searching for, I'm getting a lot of curated, customized information that I value. So there is a lot of positive for some people, but all of this information does reinforce a ton of cognitive and social biases, both for users of what information we're getting, but also any agenda that other institutions, companies, governments, nation states, organizations want you to think about. So these terms that are on this slide, shadow banning, echo chambers, popularity bias, all of this is very, very real, right? The echo chambers are the kind of the digital real estate that you're in. The message that you put out is the message that you will receive, right? Popularity bias, things that are viral. What is making something go viral? And a lot of times it's fucked up, traumatic things that are reshared on the internet that continue to go viral. And I have a lot of opinions about popularity bias, about opinion leaders that are not always accurate with their information, and the harms that that can push into society around misinformation, disinformation. But a lot of times we assume that virality equates to truth, and that is far from it. It is not the case at all. I would say quite the opposite. When things go viral, I personally am very less likely to believe it. And then there's the element of outrage culture that exists within social media, of pushing people to look to things to become more angry about, to become outraged about, to be glued to your screen, looking at comments, looking at interactions that perhaps are polarizing us. A lot of this is intentional. And a lot of this is done by bot farms. Many of the hateful, derogatory comments that you see under wildly polarizing videos, especially I think this is quite apparent in the United States, is made by bot farms. It's done by nation states. And because of artificial intelligence, because of the information that we are putting into tools and technology, all of that data that's being collected, there are AI bots that are speaking just like us. There's deepfake technologies and videos that are creating information that is not decipherable to the human eye as being fake, and it's going rampant. And because people aren't taking the time to slow down, to be digitally mindful, these things go viral, and then these things continue to spread and create a divisive world on the internet, especially as it relates to headlining topics. And how a lot of these algorithms function and work are unknown to us because it's proprietary, which is also known as private information to the technology owners, so Facebook and Twitter. And these things are called black box algorithms. So it's hard for us to say when it comes to shadow banning, when it comes to content filtration, if it's true or not, if it's actually happening or not. It's hard to gather the evidence because of black box algorithms. So again, we talked about what algorithms are. We talked about the simplicity of them and that they exist everywhere. Then we also talked about how they can spread like wildfire, wildfire, because of the computational capabilities and the bias that exists behind many algorithms, specifically against Black and brown people, against Black and brown women and women in general. And now we're here talking about social media. I've shared a lot of information with you all and it's intense. And I want to take a step back and allow for the narrative sharing portion of this conversation. So Nicole, if you don't mind going to the next slide. So here we are, we're gonna go into the narrative sharing. If you could go one more slide. Okay, so I want us, and if you're comfortable with it, raise your hand to join the stage. I want to know what questions are coming to mind. Most importantly, I want to know how you feel after learning this. And I want to know if this is something that you knew about or you had a hunch about, and get some of that sentiment of sentiment analysis, essentially is what it is, of what you're experiencing right now, hearing this information. So if we have any brave souls to share your voice, that it would be my honor. So I'll take a second and allow you to go ahead and share if you'd like to join.
I have a question. Hi, I'm Bailey Rose. So if we were to create an app, if we're the founder of an app, like I am, and it actually hasn't been created yet, I'm using Typeform to beta test things. What would you say to work with engineers? Because I'm not a coder, I just have the idea. What would you say to start as a roadmap for people who are building code to be open to not being biased, because it's like you're gonna mess up anyways.
Yeah, that's a really great question. We are going to have an opportunity to answer questions during the Q&A. I am going to flip it back to you. I will answer that question later on, but I want to know, is this information that you knew about before as somebody that's building a tool?
Yeah, what is that documentary? It's
Coded Bias?
Yeah, I watched that. And I just, as a starting to get into the startup world, I know that there is just so much talk about being a woman's person in the tech world and being a person of color and all of these things, all these statistics, is just that these demographics are not there. And so it's just even harder to get into that world. And so I'm like, great, awesome. Like, like, what do you do about it?
Yeah,
because that's been kind of like the dialogue.
for sure.
So,
For sure. Would you say that you've had any experiences yourself where there's been a moment and you thought, damn, did that just happen? Is something funky related to your social media experience at all, where you're wondering if you were a victim of algorithmic bias by chance?
I know that I am all the time. And then there's just really creepy things like you wear a sweater, you wear, like what I'm wearing right now is just like a tank dress. And I will be on camera and then they'll advertise that to me. And I'll post that, a photo of me, and then they'll advertise that to me, which I kind of like. That it's like, that is the kind of stuff that I like.
Yeah, totally. Okay, thank you for that. And Bailey, I'll answer your question during the Q&A. I think we have 3 more people that are waiting to join the stage. So thank you for braving the camera and joining and sharing your experience. And I'll get to your questions soon. Awesome. If Nicole, you want to bring on whoever else wanted to join the stage.
Hi, Tazin, thank you so much for walking through all of this. So my name is Mina. I work with an organization called Second Muse on a program called Headstream, which is basically trying to create an ecosystem of digital spaces that are designed consciously to uplift youth well-being, specifically for Black, Brown, queer, and femme youth. And so to answer your first question, like, I love the book of Algorithms of Oppression, and I feel like you shed light on a lot of the things that I read from the book and from Ruha Benjamin's Race After Technology. The thing that I always get stuck in though, which I think you mapped out really beautifully, and I want to like go in a little bit further, is like what is the pathway to influence change when seeing algorithmic bias so blatantly affecting Black and Brown youth and people in general?
I'm writing your question down because it's so awesome. The pathway to influence change. This is critical questioning Socratic seminar style, right? I would say is somebody that is, you seem like you're a digital native, you know and understand technology, you've been using it, you're a part of an organization that is building a space through the use of technology. Would you say that that's a fair analysis of you? Okay. And you're a woman. And are you a part of like, would you feel comfortable answering like what generation you're a part of? Are you millennial, Gen Z?
Yeah, I'm a zillennial. I was born in
Millennial.
1996, which is between millennials and Gen Z.
Okay. Okay, awesome. So with all of that information, right, and you clearly have a background, you've been studying, you've read Dr. Sophia Noble's book, you know about Dr. Ruha Benjamin, Race After Technology, her book, Race After Technology. In your own words, I can answer this question, obviously, but what would be your answer to that question? And anybody else in the chat, the question is, what's the pathway to influence change? That's such a good question.
So this is a question that I spent a lot of time thinking about, and I appreciate you probing it back to me because I want to dig into it or have you tick into it. But I think I don't have the exact answers, but when I look at the realm of possibilities, I'm like, look, there are a lot of people, like I am a Swana Middle Eastern like woman, like refugee family, like people don't like look like me when they're designing technology. And like a lot of the times the people, like you said, the people that are designing technology are not only create racist technology, but they perpetuate privileges that are just blatant ignorance. So I'm like, one, there needs to be influence of like, how do you influence incumbents of power in big tech, whether it is the engineers, whether it's the people who are marketing, how do you influence trust and safety in some of these really large tech companies that create that bias? And then also I'm like, what does it mean to co-create and bring co-creation as a part of that process? Because you need, when you center the user in the design of technology, and especially the most vulnerable users, you actually end up creating change for everybody. And so I'm like, yes, okay, this is the path. But then I'm like, oh my God, when you lead co-creation, it actually sometimes leads to exploitation of people's ideas and how like preventing that. And I'm like, okay, let's bring new people and like consciousness into the design of technology from its root. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, like, are they going to steal the ideas of like Black and brown people because these establishments are so humongous? And so I think, and I also don't even think it's just stuck to the realm of like large, like big tech. It's also like thinking about like entrepreneurs and startups, like a new wave of social technology is emerging. And like, how do you create these design principles to embed consciousness, to understand like algorithmic bias, like from the get-go? So that would be my answer to you. But I think I'm like, is there more, or is that so vast already? And I'd love to hear even other people's ideas.
Thank you so much for sharing, Mina. It just means the world to have interaction during presentations like this, and embedding consciousness. I think, okay, everything. So
you too, everything you said too. I'm like snapping the whole presentation.
Thank you. Everything that I'm sharing is built on the backs of Dr. Sophia Noble, Dr. Ruha Benjamin, Dr. Joy Bulamwini, and countless others in the space. I think that when it comes to finding a pathway to influence change, personally, in really simple terms, I believe that it comes from awareness and self-agency. And, you know, there is the other piece of it where we often, and the founder of Color of Change, or I think he's the president, Rashid, at the Unfinished conference last year said, you know, we often put the onus of revolution and resilience on the people that have been oppressed. So there's this element of, you want change to fight the systemic bullshit that exists, fight back. And so I try to be cautious of how I pose the element of autonomy and self-made digital agency, because I do believe that it is not necessarily the responsibility of the oppressed to have to create the answers, and that it is the responsibility of the technology builders of our government. But when the fuck have they ever done the right thing in the right time frame? It doesn't happen. And so then what are we left with? And I think that revolution in this sense, especially as it relates to algorithmic bias, is through digital mindfulness. It's about being conscious about what you're consuming. It's about being conscious about the fact that the internet is biased to the information that we're all putting into it, in addition to the people that are creating the systems themselves. It's interdisciplinary. The facets and the elements of the technologies and the things that we create, there's a lot of industries that are fighting, or even people. I did this. I'll give an example of this. Last year, there were a lot of digital marketers talking about social media bias, especially during the BLM stuff in 2020. And I immediately, you know, talking about security and privacy. And there was a moment where my ego puffed up thinking, oh, why are they talking about this? They're not an expert. They're not in security. If you're not an expert, you shouldn't be talking about this. And then I had to catch myself, like, Tazin, you sound dumb as hell right now. Of course they should be talking about this. Everybody that uses the internet, that is that uses technology, has a cell phone, everyone should be talking about this. So very, very high level, Mina, it's awareness, and it's self-agency and digital mindfulness. Yeah, I think it starts there, and that's a very, very simple way to talk about complex things that are as big as galaxies to talk about, right? And so it's like, think of a galaxy, and we're like such a small part. Like the way that we're sharing is like an ant in a galaxy of information and potential problems that exist. So I know that awareness isn't the only answer, but it's the answer I can give right now to at least let the people in this room know that you being aware is a part of the revolution. Thank you. I think that that's probably time, because we're getting into the Q&A phase. Thank you everybody for sharing. If you want to keep sharing your narrative, your lived experiences, please do. This information is incredibly valuable to us at Cyber Collective, to be able to use this and create material. Nicole, if you go to the next slide, please. So we know that algorithms are biased. Now what? And this is the part that's important. And I think Mina was such a beautiful transition into the now what part of what we're going to talk about. And Nicole, if you go to the next slide, please. This is a quote from Ruha Benjamin. Like, Mina, you really touched on everything because you mentioned Ruha Benjamin's name. So the now what, I think this quote shares something really great. Ruha says, by pulling back the curtain and drawing attention to the forms of coded inequity, not only do we become more aware of the social dimensions of technology, but we can work together against the emergence of a digital caste system that relied on our naivety when it comes to the neutrality of technology. It includes an elaborate social and technical apparatus that governs all areas of life. And I think what she is sharing, at least what I take away from this, is that we're at the pulling back the curtain stage and drawing attention to the forms of inequity. Consider even 2020 to now. We've been pulling back a lot of curtains. There's been a lot of attention drawn to push the global minority, the global Anglo minority, to see the inherent bias that exists, right, within the world and what the global majority is experiencing. So if we go into, well, I will, yeah, thank you. So I think, I know that a lot of people have asked about shadow banning, but I'm gonna, actually, Nicole, if you can go to the next slide instead, and then we can come back to the shadow banning slide. Thank you so much. I think digital mindfulness is something that we at Cyber Collective are very keen to and hold very close to us. I think it starts with thinking about your actions on the internet. And again, I don't want anyone to feel as though I'm putting the pressure on you to be the one to have ownership of the problems that really are caused by other people. But unfortunately, if we want to see change, we got to do something about it. And the best way, in my opinion, to enact mass change is to change your own behavior, to think about yourself before you worry about what other people are doing. And I think what social media perpetuates is this element of becoming outraged of what other people says, what other people are doing. I think it's like the concept of minding your business doesn't really exist anymore in social media. And so one of the first things that I think we could do as a collective to help with a lot of the information that is being shared, the popularity bias problem, the potential technological redlining, which is done by systems. It's not really something that we can do anything about, but at least we can be aware. But when it comes to resharing information that you're not sure is true or not. And I know damn well I don't care if you're a researcher, there are people in this room, I'm sure, that have shared a meme or shared something that they have not read through all the way, that they have not fact checked. Maybe you do it now, but at least one time you've done it. And I catch myself from doing it I catch myself trying to do it all the time. So 1, am I sure what I am sharing is true? Have I fact checked? 2, have I checked the sources and read the entire article before having an opinion about something? 3, how can what I share potentially harm the cause I'm trying to help? 4, do I even know the person that perhaps is sending me this critical information and asking me to reshare? Or do I know personally the opinion leader that might be sharing certain elements of information as fact? And then not last, but last for at least this slide, is have I double checked and vetted the person or organization sending me something to open or click? And this goes into the security risks of things and how social engineering is used to get access into information. And that's a conversation for a different day, a conversation that you can follow on cybercollective.org or on our Instagram, because we're talking about it often. But if there are any other questions that you think would be helpful or beneficial, let's co-create them, ask them in the chat. Things that you think we can ask ourselves as an audit before our fingers are quick to share something. I know that Twitter has a function of, did you read this article before you share it? And what's fascinating, and I was at dinner with some friends last night, and we said, it's so funny that Twitter can choose to implement that. They have the power to implement a light box that pops up and says, are you sure you read the article? Facebook and Instagram doesn't have that. Why not? You know, I think we know. So I'm going to leave that there. I know shadow banning is a really, really big topic, especially with everything that happens, specifically with the slow factory. I think that activists at large, and I want to talk about shadow banning real quick because it's hard to pin down. I personally am not an expert on shadow banning and the criteria around it. I have done research, I've spoken to experts. So this is information that I've gotten from them. But a large part of shadow banning is like quite technical, and it has to do with something called rate throttling. And rate throttling is done in systems within servers. So it was done to mediate against the, let's say, the bots and automated inquiries and information that comes into a system. And sometimes they come so fast that it'll overload a system. And rate throttling is the method to mediate an influx of information pooling into a system, to slow it down, to let the system recalibrate. And if there's anybody more technical in this room and you have a better way to describe that, please feel free to share in the chat. Again, like I said, I'm not an expert in the space of shadow banning and how rate throttling is done. But at times, what happens because of the popularity bias of the term shadow banning, it went rampant, right? Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's like, I'm shadow banned, and perhaps you are, maybe. Or perhaps you used bots to get more followers. And now Instagram or social media knows that you use bots and it's slowing down your usage because of that rate throttling. It's coming in too fast, and that's something automated. A lot of the shadow banning responses essentially are automated as well. So the bots, auto posting software, posting more than 3 times a day with any external links, excessive commenting, buying followers, using inauthentic hashtags, using banned hashtags, and excessively engaging or having way too many people in your account can cause shadow banning. Now, these are all the very like technical ways, the known ways to avoid shadow banning and whatnot. But because of the black box algorithm, we still don't really know what's happening and how Black and brown people or certain organizations that are revolutionizing against malpractice in different industries are perhaps being targeted by bots and bot farms to have rate throttling happen and then be shadow banned. Even if it's not the entity itself, there are bot farms that perhaps are targeting certain entities. So I wanted to share that because I know that there were a lot of questions around it. It's 1:07. We are at time. I think that there will be a Q&A. But I just hope that this information was helpful. I hope that this has you thinking critically about your relationship with technology, that you take the time to slow down. And I want to share that Dr. Sophia Noble, in her acknowledgements in her book, wrote, "I suffer in trying to find ways to repay her, because what may have been small gestures on her part were enormous to me." And I feel that way about all of the women that have aided this presentation, their work, their research, their kindness, and their friendship. And I thank you all for being here. I thank Slow Factory for the interpreters. Once again, I'm Tazin Khan, and I'm representing Cyber Collective. And yeah, thank you all.
Thank you so much, Tazine. That was so good and so disturbing, but so informative. And I know that we're all taking away so much. And I want to get through some of these questions. And I just want to say, yeah, that Slow Factory, we do face shadow banning a lot, especially we notice it. We talk about Palestine, our engagement plummets after that. So I also want to kind of encourage everybody to please connect with us on Slack, join our newsletter. We want to have ways to connect outside of the algorithm and still share community with one another. So just kind of want to, bring us closer to there. Let's get into these beautiful questions. Here we go. An anonymous attendee asked, I listened to a podcast that talked about how targeted ads are actually not necessary to improve our user experience. Although that's something that we are constantly told that it does improve our online interaction. So I found it interesting that they argued that when you search something, everybody should get the same results unless you add something like a location filter. Do you have any thoughts or opinions or resources on targeted ads versus contextual ads?
That's a really great question. And I do agree that they're not necessary. I know that this is a really large conversation within the big four right now, specifically within a lot of the antitrust hearings that are happening and the privacy debates, specifically between Apple and Google. I don't believe that I'm the best person to answer this question around targeted ads and contextual ads. But what I can do is find some information and perhaps share it with the Slow Factory because I am confident in finding the right resources for you. But I don't think that I could answer that in a way that would suffice. But yes, you don't need targeted ads. It really does have to do with the entities and the ad industry and the way that the data ecosystem perpetuates the use of data collected and aggregated. But the technical aspects of it on the back end, I'm unfamiliar with, but I can try to find answers for you.
Thank you so much. And also, it's another Slack plug is that we do share all the resources, the glossary, any questions that we don't get to, we'll move that all to Slack. So that's, let's continue the conversation. Back towards shadow banning. So someone asks, thank you for this insightful, meaty conversation. Do you have any suggestions for Black women on Instagram hoping to overcome shadow banning? I post and reshare a lot about Black, Indigenous, and people of color topics, which Instagram seems to dislike, and therefore they often seem to not push what I create within my writing business to my own audience.
That's a great question. And I'd have to do some research about your page because, like I said, sometimes what we think is shadow banning because of the popularity bias and the headlines around shadow banning, we think the algorithm isn't picking up the tools that we're creating on Instagram or the information we're sharing. And it could be, Instagram loves visuals. Instagram has now turned into a video content tool as well. So it's not always about the shadow banning piece. It could be that, and I don't want to make an assumption, maybe you are doing this already, but they do favor the type of content that they want to see. And right now they're trying to be like TikTok. So they want reels and they're changing their platform to match what TikTok is doing. And additionally, when you share writing or a meme or something without a visual or a face on it, Often the tool doesn't pick that up either. They're looking for faces as opposed to writing. I want to share that that doesn't mean that you're not being shadow banned, but because if you're posting a lot, if you see that people are commenting or can't comment on your posts, or if you see that someone else has reshared your post, but other people can't see the reshare on their page. So for example, if you posted something, one of your friends reshares, but no one in their network can see the post that they reshared, that's a good that's a good indicator that you perhaps have been shadow banned. And I would recommend not using your Instagram for a few days, waiting between 4 to 5 days before you post again to reconfigure, and let the automated filtration, or like even I'm not sure what the technical term is on the back end, but that pause definitely helps.
That's especially tricky, I think, when you're doing work in activism, because you don't want to share people's faces and their identities sometimes to protect them. So it's just interesting and disturbing to see what information does and doesn't circulate. And maybe, I mean, Instagram is like this mega giant where, you know, it is good for spreading information at a very surface level as like an introduction, but, you know, maybe it's not the space to have these conversations. Sometimes kind of go back and forth on that. Let's see. I see you typing an answer to this question, but it's a good question, so I'm going to read it. Rushi, sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly, but my question to you is, just like how we know big companies and rich people have influenced our laws and our government and policies for forever, do you think the same influence is happening with technology, and hence the lack of change from organizations?
1000%. Absolutely. Absolutely times 1000 again and again and again. Especially I would urge you all to just make some correlative connections, right? It's all about thinking big picture when you're wondering these things. And often our intuition and our hunches are accurate, right? If we think that something may be connected, it might not be the exact answer, but often there is some sort of a tie, and it's inevitable. That's how the systems exist, right? And even with this conversation about decentralization and Web3, which I don't even have the capacity to get into today, but there's so much about it that I'm still learning and don't understand. But a lot of people are saying that now everyone is going to have access. And I'm trying to dig into the question that you just asked, right? Like, who's behind this? And is it really going to help everybody? Will everybody be able to participate and have it be decentralized, essentially? Another example of this is, you know, the Earn It Act. I say this all the time. There's an act that's out right now in legislation about removing or allowing the government back-end access to encrypted platforms, which means the government getting access to shit they shouldn't get access to. And so they're saying that they want access to help children, which seems to be the guise that's used a lot to get information. And I have this video on my Instagram, and I don't know, you know, if it goes, if people say it, people will see it. But if you think about the demographic of people that are watching child pornography, that are, abusing children, it's the same demographic that's the majority in the United States government. It's the same demographic across the board. And the people that are trying to push this act and try to get back-end access, I mean, you can connect the dots and try to see, does everybody have that intention? No. But do I think that there are larger things at play? It has to do with, I mean, Jeffrey Epstein's case, and Max, what's her name? Ghislaine, Maxwell, I believe, his counterpart. If you watch the Epstein documentary and you think about the people that were involved and how that didn't get a lot of play on the internet. A lot of people were not following that case. And you connect that to the Earn It Act, and you connect the Earn It Act to the demographic of people, and a lot of connections can be made. I'm not saying I'm making those connections, but I'm saying that you might be able to make them yourself.
Mm. Oh,
I know.
That's I'm gonna move on to the next question because that is really just heavy. And yeah. Hazley asks, she says, thank you so much for how your contentious and conscious way of advising audience members to shield their hearts while we learn about these algorithms. And they ask, could you share more about bot farms? Do these in some cases receive state funding? What is the incentive for these entities or companies to run these bot farms? For them, what is the function of divisiveness? Does that increase profitability, or is there a political reason? And I think that kind of goes in with what you were just saying. So it's like a good follow-up.
Yeah, that's a really great question. Now, bot farms and the way that they're used, I know them. The research that I've done have been in relation to nation states and bot farms being used by government entities and extremist groups. So, ISIS, then there's a lot of Russian bot farms, a lot of, well, let me not use countries, but bot farms from other countries and states, nation states, essentially. And they are absolutely used both for political gain and to continue to drive, I think, polarization within certain spaces. A great example of this, if you haven't seen The Great Hack on Netflix, they do a really, really fine job of explaining what happened with the Cambridge Analytica case and the presidential election in 2016. And the way that bot farms were used to create fake Black Lives Matter protests that people went to and protested at. And the creator of the protest, it went viral, but the creator was not a Black person, a part of the Black Lives Matter movement. And a lot of bot farms and bot activity was used for the election, I believe, in Trinidad. And there was an entire movement, a fake movement that people ended up joining on that was done to polarize and separate the Afro-Caribbean people and Indian Caribbean people. And the entire movement, I forget the details of it, but there was like a hand signal that they used. There was a slogan that existed, and all of that was created by somebody else to entice more separation. And everything that Cambridge Analytica did with the data collection was used for political activity, was used to get people elected, was used to get people out of power, and it is still being used that way. We in America don't have any existing, like in the United States, pardon me, we don't have existing federal legislation for consumer data protection. There are a lot of bills being passed at the state level, but we don't have anything federal the way that the EU does with GDPR. And I forget what GDPR stands for. It's data protection regulation, I forget, but it helps protect consumer data. And so that's kind of the fundamental part of it. What's happening with your information and how is it being used by other entities? And right now, as the founder of Cambridge Analytica, Alex, said, the United States is a wild, wild west because you can do whatever you want with other people's information. And we are the country of convenience. And we uphold convenience over over the real truths of what's happening behind it, and it's allowed for a lot of the problems that we're experiencing today. And that's why it goes back to what I said about agency, and knowing like what you're doing on the internet, and are you choosing convenience and giving up your information into an application, and should you?
This is definitely making me rethink auto saving all my passwords, and I just want to delete everything and go MIA. But
Yeah.
I'm gonna save all these questions and then I'll send them to you, and then maybe you can answer them, and then we can continue the conversation in Slack. I think maybe I'll just wrap up with one more. And Sean asks, I found much of the reporting around security, privacy, and algorithmic bias to be quite technical, and by extension, hard to get friends invested without their feeling overwhelmed. Are there any good introductory steps for curious learners? And I know that's like very much what you do at Cyber Collective. So please plug the company and let us know. And then if you have any concluding thoughts, beyond that, or any takeaways that we can take,
Thank you. I would say following the work of these incredible women, so Dr. Sophia Noble, Dr. Ruha Benjamin, Dr. Joy Bulamwini, and I hope I'm pronouncing her last name properly, but they are really great in sharing simple things. And I like to start with pushing people to the documentaries that are available on Netflix. So Coded Bias is wonderful, The Great Hack, and then also The Social Dilemma. And again, when you talk to your friends and family, let them know that these are galaxies that we're talking about. And the things that really get people going is the ethical elements of things of, oh, you're taking my data. And often it can become there's this element of absolutism that exists, but you can have convenience and still be secure. You can be secure and private, but still be authentic on the internet, and still be able to share things and vlog and do all the fun things that we love the internet for. And a resource for that, I mean, obviously, shameless plug, attending any Cyber Collective events, following us on Instagram, cybercollective.org, and then on Twitter, it's at getcyco. And you can also follow me. I have a show called Security, Privacy, and a lot of other bullshit, where I talk about headlining topics and I break them down in simple language and get people to ask ethical questions about it. Those are some immediate things that come to mind. At Cyber Collective, we are working on programming to make this information more accessible to people. If you go on our YouTube channel, there's, I think, like 11 to 13 videos of different workshops that we've held, how to securely use social media, how to privately use social media, what is social engineering. There's a lot of content that we're creating. So honestly, there aren't a lot of organizations that exist that are using language that are simple and accessible and making it fun and interactive. I haven't seen anybody do it like us. I do see our influence in the wild. I see that happening. I see y'all, I know it's happening. So more organizations will pop up, I'm sure. And that's the exciting thing about it. And I can share some more tangible resources with the Slow Factory as well to share with you all. The name of the show is Security, Privacy, and a lot of other bullshit.
Yes, and thank you, Paloma, dropping all the links in the chat. Make sure everybody, collect those and hang on to those. Tazin, the work that you and your team does at Cyber Collective is so necessary and so timely. So thank you so much for the work that you do and for this amazing, insightful, eye-opening presentation. Everyone, thank you so much. Cynthia, Jenny, we appreciate you so much. Tazin, thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you. I have one ask of everybody, which I totally forgot to ask before we leave. But if anyone in this room, we have a survey here that would really help us as an org. If you can let us know if we've helped you become or feel more safe, secure, and confident online through this presentation, it would mean the world to us. So if you have the time and the capacity, please take the survey. Thank you.
Yes, please, everyone, take that. This is something that's so needed in our digital age. So, appreciate you so much. Thank you, team. Thank you, Slow Factory. Give us, join our Slack community. We'll post the link in there one more time. If you are able to also make a donation, this is what keeps Open EDU free and accessible, so we can bring information like this, to the public without any barriers. So if you're able to, please consider making a donation. Definitely join Slack. And thank you so much. I hope everyone has a very safe weekend, physically safe, digitally safe, all of the above. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, everybody. Have a beautiful day.
Bye, everyone.